I will never be surprised by the amount of bullshit people create just to make money. Like, it's amazing. You see it every single day. You see it with these MLMs, these multi-level marketing schemes. You see it with essential oils. You see it with, I mean, it's snake oil is all it is. It's the classic snake oil. It's all bullshit. The things that people create and say, this will do good for you because of XYZ, with like no scientific research, just nothing. There's just nothing. It's just, they're just saying this is what it is. And then they're just good salespeople, and they convince regular human beings to waste their money on these things that do absolutely nothing. And I came across this one from like the 1950s, the Orgone accumulator. So the Orgone accumulator was a device sold in the 1950s. Its inventor claimed that it allowed a person sitting inside to attract orgone, O-R-G-O-N, orgone, a massless healing energy. When the FDA was investigating the device, they noted that one purchaser, a college professor, knew it was quote-unquote phony, but found it, quote, helpful because his wife sat quietly in for 4 hours every day. Oh, boomer humor. Who doesn't love a good boomer joke? Oh, my wife sits in here for 4 hours. It's been peaceful. But yeah, this is a pseudoscientific concept of something that they called esoteric energy, or a universal life force. So for those who don't know, I'm going to drop a link in the show notes for the Wikipedia page. But boy howdy, all it is a box. It's just a box that sits in your house. And then when you open said box, you can sit on a chair that's in the box and then close the door and sit in the darkness. That's it. That's all this thing. That's all this thing is. It's just bullshit. That's all it is. But obviously people believed it. I mean, as of 1982, which isn't that long ago. It's longer than me. But there's been a whole wing dedicated in New York for the continuation of this guy's work, because these idiots believe that this thing works. Like, it's literally just a box, just sitting in a box, and it's supposed to renew your life force or something. Like it's so dumb. It's so dumb. It's so dumb that what if this thing actually did something interesting? Maybe if like somebody sat in this thing, they got transported to another dimension, or they were able to connect to people on their similar wavelength, or maybe it was just like a giant telephone. But whatever it could be, could make for a pretty cool story. This is #FlashFiction. It's a show about writing in real time. I am your host, Eric M. Hunter, and I've been writing stories since I was a child. There are a million ways to start a story, and you never know how it's going to go. It could be really good, or it could be really bad. Let's see what happens. So like I said, I love stuff like this. I love the idea of taking a machine or a common household item and turning it into something unreal and using it and having it have unreal abilities. You kind of got that in one of our previous episodes. It's all theatrics, where we take an ordinary telephone and we turn it into a phone that can connect to everybody on Earth. You know, it's just pushing you forward into the supernatural, into the super unreal, you know. It's Twilight Zone. And I have always enjoyed stories like that. I don't know why. It may be because it's an item that you interact with on a daily basis. You know how it works. You know how to use it. But then when you come across one that acts differently, then you're intrigued. You know, it's the phone booth that's not hooked up to anything, but rings all the time. So it reminds me of a story in one of Chuck Palahniuk's books. The book is Haunted. It's basically just a collection of short stories. And the story is called The Nightmare Box. Just as a brief little description here, it says exactly what the box reveals to the reviewer remains a mystery throughout the book, though it is assumed that the box always shows the same image. Each of the 4 people who have said to have looked inside all go crazy. Not stark raving mad, mind you, but they each give up on their life in their own way. And then it ends up in an antique shop or something like that, and then somebody buys it and blah, blah, blah. And again, you never find out what each person sees when they look inside the box, but whatever it does, it screws them up. I love stories like this. I love the idea of like just that little bit of madness that peeks through in what could be considered just a traditional story, just a traditional fiction story, and then all of a sudden this crazy thing happens. I love stuff like that. That stuff. Those are stories I really enjoy reading. But yeah, this Orgone, that's exactly what this is. This Orgone accumulator is basically just a wooden box. The internal is just some sort of metal, I guess. And then it's supposed to bring in just some life, just some chi. It's so dumb. All right. So with all that silliness out of the way, let's start writing. So I'm thinking this story is going to be it's going to be more of like a test thing. As a person who's been in sales for about 15 years, I like telling stories from a salesman's perspective, mainly just because it's something that I know pretty much through and through. And a lot of that in terms of writing a story is just, again, an easy jumping point to kind of get the ball rolling. It may not be something that sticks in the story. It may not be something that is going to be permanent, but it allows me to get words on a page. And then once I'm done with that, I can go back and change as necessary. But I need words on a page. So if somebody needs to be a profession or we need to start in a professional environment, usually I pick a sales environment just because I know the layout for that. So that's what I'm going to do. So we're going to be sitting in a sales room, and there's going to be a salesperson selling the machine. Oh, one fun, neat thing that I came across. Obviously, if you've listened to the other episodes, I hate naming characters because I could care less about what named characters are because the names don't mean anything to me. I bought a book, and it's a R.A. Salvatore, one of the Hunter's Blade from the Drizzt Chronicles. It's a fantasy D&D Wizards of the Coast book. R.A. Salvatore is a great writer. He is amazing at describing fight scenes, which is one of the reasons why I read his books, because when he takes two characters and pits them against each other in a battle of swords, he is so intricate and detailed about the fight scene that it's hard not to read. His scenes are like very exciting. He does great with creating characters that not only exist in a fantasy setting, but are also a little bit of aloof and kind of stick out like sore thumbs. And then you watch these characters of his try to fit inside this world. Highly recommended. If you've any of the Drizzt books, especially the first or second trilogies, especially the Icewind Dale trilogy, highly recommended. If you're into fantasy at all, those three novels are amazing. Like those books are some of the very few books that I've reread over the course of having come across them, and I can count the amount of books that I've reread on a single hand. So if that's any indication of how good those books are, definitely check out the Icewind Dale trilogy. I bought one of those books from a Goodwill, and there was pages inside one of the books, and on some of these pages are names. They're just like regular names. Laura Dent, Ryan Mills, CJ Hooter, that's a name. Mike Reese. I don't know who these people are, even if they're real names. Ryan Wallace, Julian Howard. They seem kind of fake, don't they? But some of the names are circled. Some of the names are crossed out. Some of the names are numbered. I don't know. I don't know what these pages are. I don't know what they mean. They're from the previous owner. But boy, howdy. You hear that? We got names now. We got names that I can literally use. This woman's name is going to be... Give me a woman's name. Emily Young. Emily Young is now our main protagonist. Thank you, forgetful reader who gave their book to the Goodwill. You shouldn't have. It's a really good book. How do you describe wood on a box? I have no idea. So as I'm writing this, it's already coming off like just like a super shitty 1950s showroom, like it's your used car salesman where the sales guy is kind of sleazy, the husband's a total dick, and the wife is property. It's just that it's just that terrible bygone era that a lot of people still try to strive in. And it's funny to write, and it's also sad because it's like I can see the entire image in my head of what's going on. I can see what their characters look like. I can see what they're wearing, even though that doesn't matter in terms of this short story. She's a housewife. She's done up pretty for her husband. Her husband's just a dumb, arrogant, sexist, piece of shit, basically. I'm starting to realize that she sees this box, this Orgone accumulator 2000 of what I'm calling it, as like her escape from him, from the life that she's living right now. This is her way of getting out of the hell that she's currently living in, which could be one of the reasons why she's so adamant about getting one. Not just because she feels like it's going to do good for her and her future, but she literally sees this as a machine to escape from her current situation. Now that I think about it, I hadn't really thought about what I was going to do when she gets inside. Like, I was toying with the idea that maybe it was like a communication device that it allowed her to communicate with other people who were sitting in these boxes, or it could communicate with a higher, just a higher presence, like a god of some sort. I'm thinking of the scene from Star Wars of Last Jedi where in it, Rey, the protagonist, she finds this hole on this island that is, covered in darkness. It's, it's nothing but the dark side down there, nothing but pure evil. And she goes down there because she's hoping that it'll show her who her parents are. And it's this very cool effect where she sees an infinite amount of her standing in front of her. So when she moves her arm, the copy in front of her then moves, that's her arm, and then her arm, and so on and so on and so on. And it's just this beautiful effect, like this infinite mirror effect. And when she finally gets to the other side and she puts her hand on the wall to says, "Show me my parents," the figure that appears is her. Obviously, as a viewer, you're left to, articulate that however you want. But the visual of that scene sticks in my mind because of just how creepy it is, for one, and then just the sheer possibility of what you could do with that scene. Like, there's so many ways that you can show that scene and have a different outcome than they did in the movie. So that's one thing I'm coming back to. The other thing I'm thinking of is maybe it's just like a time machine that she like legitimately time travels to somewhere else. The other thing I was thinking was maybe it's kind of like a bomb shelter. So yeah, she's getting in it because she thinks it does a certain thing to her life, her libido, or whatever you want to call it. When she hears like a rumble, and then when she gets out, like the whole place is leveled and she's the only one left standing, and now the world's in ruin. I don't know yet. I don't know how I'm gonna end it, which is fun and exciting and kind of terrifying. All right, so that went a little easier than I was expecting. I already know what the problems are in the story because once I started in on her walking and sitting in the machine and then them closing the door, I was like, all right, what am I going to do? She's in the dark. Okay, she starts to hear things in the dark. She starts to see things in the dark. And then I kind of, I hate this where it's like, oh, I just let my characters do their thing. And then the story comes out how they're supposed to be, which is complete bullshit. It's all bullshit. Like, I knew that when she got into this machine, I wanted her to experience something that she either couldn't experience or had never experienced that would force her to want to buy it on a spiritual level. I just didn't know what that was. So when I started thinking of like, okay, what could she be seeing? What could she be doing? And then when I grasped onto that idea, and then I started to build on it, I immediately was just like, okay, I have to change all of this because now that I know what she's doing and where she's going, the editing needs to come back into play. So I went ahead and just finished it, and then I have sort of a pseudo ending, And I'm going to assume that the word count is, okay, yeah, so the word count's at 1286. So immediately the problems are I take way too long in the beginning to get her into the intro. And I think I mentioned that before. We're like, putting her in a sales environment is easy for me because I know sales in real life. So I can always fall back on the fact that I know what happens in a selling opportunity. And then I can use that to push the story forward, to push the narrative forward. But when it comes down to something that's entertaining, that stuff is boring for most people because a lot of people have a very poor experience when it comes to salespeople and just selling in general. I use that to my advantage to try to tell a story. So yeah, I already know where the editing is going to go. So I feel like the editing on this one is going to be very quick. It's going to be very clean. And then I guess we'll see how it comes out on the other side. Metal inside is 3 times primed and tuned to exact frequencies to maximize your experience, your journey, your cleansing, your affirmation, to maximize your I have no idea. To maximize your. All right, so here we are. We're at 997. So again, I feel like the editing process on this one was fairly simple. I knew that I just gave too much information on the front end, not enough information on the back end. Because again, like as an audience member, as a reader, you want to read what happens when she gets into the machine. Yes, you want to give a little background as to what this thing is. And we're naming it, so somebody could just Google it so to get the full history of it, much like in the story of the nuclear football. You can just Google what that is. But I was taking too much time to get her into the box. And the box is where it gets interesting. So I cut a lot of that down. I changed the fact that when she got into the box, she saw her husband, Stefan, but it was 20 years earlier when he was a nice guy. I changed that to her father because I felt like that was a little bit more emotional, and the character would want to go back because obviously her father is gone now. Yeah, so I don't know. Like this, I like this story. I feel it has potential. Again, like these mystery box stories, like you can do anything with them. You can leave them up to interpretation. You can leave them for you can be blatant and just explain everything. It's one of those types of stories that I always enjoy because what it ends up being is very rarely what I expect them to be, and I like that. And I like going back when you find out what the ending is in an actual piece of fiction, not a flash fiction, something like this. Again, this is just practice. But if I actually wanted to turn this into a short story, you would find out that all of the hints of things that she had seen when she first stepped into the box would explain itself when she actually had time to sit down and explore the box without somebody forcing her out of it or anything like that. So also, I was thinking of what am I going to call this story? And rather than just calling it the Orgone Accumulator 2000, there was a line. I have to find it now. There was a line that I wrote. Oh, here it is. She remembered back to the warning label in Homemaker's magazine. Breathe deep, stay calm. It's adjusting to your being, not the other way around. So I'm thinking it should either be called Breathe Deep, Stay Calm, or It's Adjusting to Your Being, not the other way around, which I think that's better because I feel like that's a little bit more intriguing when you're like, oh, here's a short story called It's Adjusting to Your Being, not the other way around. All right, so yeah, we're going to call this Adjusting Your Being, not the other way around. Emily's hand brushed over the Orgone Accumulator 2000's sharp edges and flush finish. The wood stained to a deep red, and she could smell a slight scent of mahogany. The metal hinges and handle shined in the overhead lights of the showroom almost to a sparkle. The voices of her husband and the salesman echoed quietly in the back of her mind, and she felt every inch of the Orgone Accumulator's design. She had seen this one the moment she walked into the door and had gracefully pulled her husband Stefan over to it. The salesman continued his pitch, about the benefits of the Orgone Accumulator 2000 that Emily already knew. She had read about it in great detail in Homemaker's magazine that she breezed while in line at the grocery store. She was so taken back by its ability that she purchased the magazine. She hid it whenever Stefan was around so he wouldn't get some crazy notion that she was filling her head with nonsense. She would wait until he was fast asleep, then creep down to the sitting room, lift the middle cushion on the couch, and find page 32 to read the same 800 words she'd read just a few hours before. Finally, she was face to face with what she had been dreaming about ever since she found the ad in Homemaker's magazine. Like I said, this beauty is top of the line. If you are truly invested in correcting your life-affirming force, then there's nothing better than this bad boy right here. He slapped the top of the box, giving Emily a start. Oh, looks like your little lady is skittish, the salesman laughed, clapping Stefan on the back. Yes, she can be like a deer stuck in headlights sometimes, but she's a damn fine cook, ain't you, honey? Stefan praised, but Emily was long gone. Her full attention was on the box. Would you like to step inside? The salesman asked, gesturing to the Orgone Accumulator 2000. Emily beamed and nodded her head, as eager as a schoolgirl, then remembered her husband. As long as it's okay with you, dear, she asked in a small voice. Stefan adjusted his belt for a moment, then peered down at the price tag. Emily's eyes went wide as she marveled at the wonder in front of her. The advertisement didn't do a bit of justice, she muttered under her breath. Stephen's attention was caught. What advertisement? He asked. Emily's eyes shot to the floor. Oh, just something I saw while grocery shopping, she lied. Stefan shook his head. See, it's things like that that get you in trouble, little lady. He looked out onto the vast showroom floor. Emily quickly grabbed his arm and spun him back to face her. No, Stefan, I want this one. Why don't we let the little lady at least try it out first? The salesman asked, motioning with his hand for her to step inside. Eager, she looked to Stefan's approval before stepping inside the Orgone Accumulator 2000. Her heart raced to a point she couldn't keep up. Her hand shook and her mind spun at the possibilities of experiencing the Orgone Accumulator 2000, if even for a moment. She slowly sat down, the anticipation coursing through her veins, and beamed at both of them. All ready? He asked. Emily nodded. Okay, it's going to be a bit jarring at first, but you need to remain calm. Just let it do its job, okay? The salesman asked. Emily nodded again and smiled brightly at Stefan as the door slowly closed, leaving her in pitch blackness. Sounds muffled from outside, and Emily could hear the faint breeze of wind coming from nowhere in particular. She was in complete darkness, and her mind began creating interesting shadows to entertain itself. She remembered back to the warning label in Homemaker's magazine. Breathe deep. Stay calm. It's adjusting to your being, not the other way around. She followed its instructions and listened with the core of her being. The ends of her fingers and toes began to tickle, then something brushed past her. She turned and peered into the darkness. The blackness had a shape now, and Emily could just make out the edges. A voice spoke from all around her. It came in a hush that echoed louder as it fell away from her. It came again and again, but Emily couldn't understand it. She tried to speak, but her throat was closed tight. The darkness calmed her from the outside in. Emily stood up, looked about her, only to realize the chair she was sitting on was no longer there. She turned her hands over in front of her eyes, and her brain did its best to reconstruct a memory of those hands in her mind. No, she thought. That's not right. The memory contorted and warped until she saw her hands grasping another's. She looked up and saw her father, a young grin that she had barely remembered. He had a glimmer of hope still in his eye before the factory job took it away. He was 30 pounds lighter, but she knew better than to say things like that. She tried to speak again. The only thing that came through was a small smile and a single tear in her eye. Father returned the smile, and together they swung into nothing. Right as she was about to stop, a beam of light tore through the black. Emily's heart stopped. The air in her lungs pressed from her, and something grabbed her tight, pulling her forward. Father's hands disappeared, and Emily found herself face down on the floor of the showroom. The carpet stunk of cigarettes and whiskey. She felt hands pulling her up to her feet. Voices came suddenly, one she felt like she knew, but it was all so far away. Everything was so far away. There you have it. So yeah, I mean, it's a fun story. I'll say that. This story has lots of potential in my mind that could be expanded upon. I was thinking like, okay, so she leaves the store, and her husband grumble, doesn't want to buy it. And in the middle of the night, she compels herself to basically break into the store and to go back to the Orgone Accumulator 2000 to try to find her father again. And then you find out like, oh, maybe her father died at a very young age when she was a baby, or she only has vague memories of him. And it becomes one of those things where it's like she's just basically trying to contact her father now, and she's using this box to do it. Again, you could do anything with this because it is that mystery box. This thing could be anything, and I just thought it'd be a fun idea for her to give her the ability to reconnect with her father, who she barely knows. So she's desperate for that now. But yeah, let me know what you thought. By God, on the internets, you can hit me up on Twitter at FlashFiction4. You can email me, hello@ericmhunter.net. Don't forget, I want to read your Flash Fiction stories. We can read them on the podcast with your permission and all the rights and all that hoopla. Just tag me on Twitter, email it to me, however you want to do it, because people want to read your stories. And until next time,